Welcome back, everybody, to the Renaissance Symbolism podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Riley. In today's episode, I will be discussing the legacy of the Boomer generation and also partly the legacy of the Greatest generation. So let's get this show on the road. The Boomer generation is a generation born between 1946 and 1964. They were the Greatest generation's children who themselves were born between 1901 and 1924. Their generation fought during World War II from 1939 to 1945 and were the most responsible for the world and prosperity which we have today. The Greatest generation are mainly now in their 90s or are celebrating their centenary. As that generation quickly fades into just a memory, it is now time to examine their children's legacy and how they compare to the legacy of their generation, what they left their own children. As for their children, the Boomer generation reached their mass retirement age, which is now 44% of them have retired, according to a Business Insider, which has reported their retirement. Most of them will probably be dead by 2040, according to the geopolitical analyst Peter Zillan. It's time to ask ourselves, has the boomers left a legacy for their children, primarily the millennials that are born between 1981 and 1996, and examine what kind of legacy the boomers have left their own children? These are primarily the millennial generation born between 1981 and 1996, and Generation Z, or the Zoomer generation, born between 1997 and 2010, though these dates vary depending on the sources that you're looking for as well. For example, sometimes the Zoomer generation is classed from 2000 to 2012. It just depends where you get the information from, and the actual officially is for each different country as well, because it works out differently in different places. Of all the generations that have made up humanity, it has to be stated its long and bloody history, the greatest generation has left their children the most prosperous and most better off than any previous generation in human history. It was the greatest generation which saw the end of imperialism, fascism, and the final defeat of communism in 1989 under the leadership of Ronald Reagan, and it also was Richard Nixon's visit to China in 1972, which also saw China move away from the Soviet Union and join, particularly the United States and the West, in its alliance against the communist Russians at the time. So the greatest generation finally saw the end of communism, saw the end of imperialism, and left the world by the early 1990s, a unipolar world that was dominated by the United States of America. In contrast, the boomer generation, they're leaving a world where it's going to be poorer. It's for various reasons, apart from the United States of America, France, and New Zealand. Everybody else was boomers, apart from Africa and a few other places, actually had children. And because people didn't have children, that means people are going to be more poor off, not be able to maintain goods and services. And also, as part of the reason, because the boomer generations, when they first entered the job market, they get home and a house on a starting salary. But now their children cannot do that because the boomer generation are preventing new houses from being built, which is also driving up housing costs and also renting as well. That means those children, the millennials, the boomers, the millennials and Gen Z are probably not going to own a home. The youngest millennial now is now 27 years old, and the oldest Zoomer is also 27 years old. So by the end of this year, most of the oldest Zoomers will be 27, and the oldest millennials, well, the youngest millennials will be 28 years old. These aren't children, these are people entering the workforce, been in the workforce for a long time as well, and they've got very little or nothing to show for it as well. Um, Also, the greatest generation also created a world of globalization. The greater world of specialization will enable the prosperity which we have today, because they created a global economic system due to the American security blanket, which meant that goods and services would become cheaper. And that meant there was greater technological process, which can be seen with the development of the smartphone and mobile phone. Rather than first being developed in the early 1980s, the world's first mobile phone was developed in 1989. These were sometimes called brick phones. Then there was the Simon personal communicator, which was released in 1994, which was the first smartphone and touchscreen phone. And finally, we have the iPhone, which was developed by Apple in 2007 and also contains entertainment systems, video games, movies, photo albums, and the sole sum of human knowledge. The iPhone and the development of that kind of technology since the 1970s have been possible due to the prosperity which was created by the greatest generation. And the boomer generation have left their children almost nothing. They haven't left them a legacy, they haven't left a more secure world. They leave a world that's going to be increasingly dangerous. They're going to pass the tax burden onto the millennials and Zoomers. They're just going to make life harder for them as well. For instance, China, that's going to go from a population of 1.4 billion to 500 million due to deaths and the fact that their boomer generation, or more particularly, the boomer generation and the preceding generations after them, didn't actually have children. Now the boomer generation controls 70% of all disposable income and they control 70% of capital. There's a possibility that they may transfer 33 trillion assets of capital upon their deaths to their children. But by then, their children would be in their 40s, 50s. They will be old themselves. It's too late to have children because people, women particularly, hit geriatric pregnancy in their mid-30s. And because they can't buy a home, they can't afford a house, they can't have security, they can't start families. So again, that's the boomer generation's fault because it's them voting in policies that deliberately harm young people, such as not building new houses or building on the green belt. If people can't buy homes, they can't have families, or they can't have very big families as well. Also, the feminist author and writer Louise Perry described pension schemes as a Ponzi scam, and that the way that retirement works, you don't pay for your own retirement, you pay for those people that have already retired. It works out well when you had like the greatest generation was a small generation, and they had the boomer generation was a massive generation. So the boomers paid for the retirement of the greatest generation. But now the pyramid, rather than being like this, rather than being like a normal pyramid, it's now an inverted pyramid. That means there's too many young people at the bottom and not enough young people to pay into the actual systems and contribute to the pension contributions. That's why taxes are going to go up higher and higher, and living costs are going to increase. Because in liberal democracies, it is the voters that count, the people that vote, and old people, they vote in record numbers compared to younger generations. And old people will also put forward their own interests. I try not to make this between old people and young people debate, only that the boomer generation have left a shoddy legacy for the millennials and the Zoomers, their children, and they made it possible to create successive generations again because the way they protect their own children but not investing in their futures as well. This pretty much covers today's topic. I will leave my blog link in the description below. If you type in the legacy of the boomer generation in my catalogue, my title, you will also find that in there as well. So you can find my articles, a lot of my content on Spotify and YouTube and other channels. The corresponding name tends to also match the corresponding article on Medium. If anything changes, I will let you know. Thank you for listening. Please take care and peace out.